For the longest time, we held on to this really fundamental idea that life on Earth, everything from microbes to whales, was entirely dependent on one thing.
The sun.
Exactly, the sun. It was supposed to be the ultimate energy source, the absolute foundation for, well, every food chain. No sun, no life. That was the rule.
That was certainly the prevailing wisdom, yes.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it made perfect sense based on almost everything we could easily see around us, right? Photosynthesis was king.
But then something truly groundbreaking happened. Scientists started seeing, well, signs of life that just defied that sun-centric view.
Hmm.
They found organisms thriving where sunlight literally never reaches. Places powered not by stars, but by Earth's own chemistry, sometimes pretty intense chemistry.
It completely fractured our understanding. I
Yeah.
mean, it forced a radical rethink of what habitable even means.
Right. It wasn't just a small tweak. It makes you question the very definition. So for this deep dive, we're going to pull back the curtain on this astonishing world of extremophiles.
These incredible organisms.
Yeah, amazing organisms that push the absolute boundaries of survival. And the idea is you're going to gain a fascinating shortcut to understanding what life truly needs to exist, both here on Earth and maybe, just maybe, far beyond.
That's the mission.
Yeah.
How do they survive?
Yeah.
What kind of life forms are we talking about? And what does it all mean?
Exactly. What does their existence imply for evolution, for technology, and maybe the most exciting part, the search for life out there in the universe? So let's start at the beginning. What did scientists traditionally believe about life's energy source? Why was the sun so central?
Well, traditionally, the belief was pretty straightforward. Plants use photosynthesis, right? They turn solar energy into chemical energy.
Okay.
And that forms the base of pretty much all the food chains we knew. Everything else either ate plants or ate the things that ate plants.
A very neat solar-powered picture.
Very neat. All energy flowing down from the sun.
So that neat picture, it seemed absolute. What was the discovery then that really cracked it wide open? When did things start to shift?
That shift really started gaining traction in the 1970s. Scientists began finding microorganisms, particularly around deep-sea hydrothermal vents, but also in other extreme spots.
Okay, vents, like volcanic activity underwater.
Exactly. Super hot, chemically rich water spewing from the ocean floor. And these microbes, they could literally, well, eat chemicals from the Earth itself.
Eat chemicals.
Yeah, instead of using light energy, they perform something called chemosynthesis. They build their own organic matter using energy they release when they break apart chemicals like hydrogen sulfide or methane.
So they're essentially munching on volcanic gases and minerals.
Pretty much. It's a completely different way to make a living, chemically speaking. No sunlight required at all.
That's just a massive paradigm shift. If life doesn't always need the sun, does that change how we think about the very first life on Earth? Could it have started somewhere dark and chemical?
Precisely. That's one of the huge implications. This discovery really bolsters the theory that the earliest life on Earth might have originated in environments like those deep-sea vents, places with lots of geological activity and chemical energy, long before photosynthesis even evolved.
It really does rewrite the origin story.
It does. And, this idea of eating chemicals is not just for these exotic deep-sea microbes. Think about cows, for example.
Cows, how do they fit in?
Well, cows themselves don't actually secrete stomach acid to digest grass in the first part of their stomach, the rumen. It's all done by microbes living inside them.
Ah, right. The gut microbiome.
Exactly. These microbes break down the tough cellulose in plants into nutrients the cow could actually use. It's a complex chemical breakdown happening entirely thanks to microbes.
That's a great example, actually. It brings it closer to home. It really makes you wonder if fundamental stuff like digestion relies on microbes using chemistry. What else are we missing?
That's the question, isn't it? What other assumptions might be wrong?
So, okay, extremophiles. When we talk about them, are we just picturing tiny, simple bacteria? Or is the picture broader than that?
That's what's really fascinating. While, yes, many extremophiles are simple, subtle organisms, the diversity is actually immense. They're not just one type of creature. Extremophiles represent all three major domains of life.
All three domains. So remind us what those are.
Right, so you have bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotes.
Okay, let's break those down. Bacteria in extreme places, what are they like?
Bacteria are, microscopic, single-celled. They're arguably Earth's simplest life forms, but also some of the most successful. They've developed these incredible adaptations
Allowing them to live where?
just about anywhere. Boiling hot springs, highly acidic waters, deep underground radioactive zones. They fill our oceans, rivers, soil, even our own bodies. And get this, the total mass of bacteria on Earth It's way greater than the mass of all animals combined.
Wow, that's staggering. Okay, so bacteria are adaptable survivors. What about archaea? I've heard they're kind of unique.
They are. Archaea look a lot like bacteria, tiny single-celled, seems simple, but genetically and biochemically, they're actually quite different. In some ways, they're more closely related to us, to eukaryotes.
Really? How so?
Well, one key thing is their cell membrane chemistry. It's often more stable than the membranes in bacteria or eukaryotes, which is probably a big reason why many of them are so good at surviving in truly extreme heat or chemical conditions.
So they're specialists in extremes.
They excel there, definitely. But it's important to remember they aren't only found in extreme places. They live in lots of the same environments as bacteria, soils, oceans. But yeah, they're famous for handling the really tough spots.
Okay, bacteria, archaea. And finally, eukaryotes. That includes us, right? Complex life. How do they fit into the extremophile world?
Right, eukaryotes have larger, more complex cells, often with a nucleus. This huge category includes everything from microscopic single-celled organisms like amoebas and yeast, all the way up to multicellular life like plants and animals, us included.
So are there complex extremophiles too? Like extremophile animals?
Yes, absolutely. There are eukaryotic extremophiles. Often, though, the eukaryotes living in these extreme places depend on the bacteria and archaea. They might eat them or rely on them in some other way. Kind of like how we depend on plants or animals that eat plants in our less extreme environments.
Oh, so even complex life finds a way, often by partnering up with the microbes.
Exactly. There are ecosystems even in these extreme niches.
This really drives home the point. What we used to think of as just barriers, impossible places for life, they're actually niches full of specialized life.
That's right. Overlooked niches.
Okay, now that we know sort of who these organisms are across the domains of life, let's really get into the where. Let's talk about the conditions, the places they've conquered. Where do we find them?
Oh, all over. Some classic examples come from places like Yellowstone National Park in the U.S. Think of Congress Pool or Octopus Spring.
Hot springs, right. Very hot, very mineral rich.
Exactly. That's where organisms like Sulfolobus acidicaldarius, quite a mouthful, and the Algocynidium caldarium were first isolated. These specific spots just highlight the incredible range of conditions life can actually tolerate. Places that seem totally hostile to us can be thriving communities.
It really does make you wonder if there's any place on Earth life hasn't found a way. Let's dive into some of those specific extremes. What about temperature?
Temperature is a big one. For extreme heat, you have hyperthermophiles. These guys redefine the upper limits. Think about Pyrolobus fumaria.
Pyrolobus fumaria. What temperature are we talking?
It can thrive, actually reproduce at 113 degrees Celsius. That's significantly above boiling point at standard pressure.
How is that even possible? Wouldn't proteins and DNA just fall apart?
That's the key insight, isn't it? How they do it. Their proteins are incredibly stable, often structured differently, and they have ways to protect their DNA, sometimes using high concentrations of salts, for instance, to prevent it from degrading in the heat.
Amazing. And this has practical uses, right?
Huge uses. The classic example is the DNA polymerase enzyme from Cervus aquaticus. It's stable at high temperatures, which is exactly what you need for PCR. The technology used to copy DNA in labs worldwide. That discovery came directly from studying these heat-loving microbes.
Okay, so that's the heat. What about the other end, extreme cold?
Yep, we have psychrophiles, cold lovers. We find life thriving in places you'd think impossible, like the Antarctic nematode, a tiny worm called Panagrelamus davidi, which can literally survive being frozen solid.
Frozen solid, wow.
Yeah, and microbes in sea ice? Microbes found deep in glaciers, even in ancient permafrost that's been frozen for thousands, maybe millions of years.
How do they manage the cold?
They've evolved specialized enzymes that work efficiently at low temperatures. And some organisms, like certain Antarctic fish, actually produce antifreeze proteins, glycoproteins in their blood to stop ice crystals from forming and damaging their cells.
Nature's antifreeze, that's incredible. Okay, temperature extremes covered. What about pH? Really acidic or really alkaline conditions?
Absolutely. Life conquers those too. On the acid side, you have organisms like the Archaean Picrophilus. It can grow at a pH around 0.
pH 0, that's like battery acid strength, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. Extremely acidic. You also find iron-oxidizing microbes that thrive in acid mine drainage, which is a big environmental issue. They're toughing it out in incredibly acidic, metal-rich waters.
And the opposite, very alkaline, like strong cleaning solutions.
Exactly. You find alkalophiles. Certain species of bacillus bacteria, for example, thrive in environments with very high pH, like soda lakes. And again, there are practical applications. They produce enzymes stable in alkaline conditions,
Yeah.
which are perfect for adding to laundry detergents to break down stains.
So enzymes from extremophiles are in my laundry detergent.
Quite possibly, it's a major industrial application.
Okay, heat, cold, pH. What about intense pressure, like deep in the ocean?
Yes, barophiles,
Yeah.
pressure lovers.
Yeah.
We've isolated microbes from the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench. We're talking depths of nearly 11,000 meters.
That's the pressure like down there.
It's immense, over 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level, enough to crush most things. But these organisms are perfectly adapted. Their enzymes and membranes function optimally under that extreme pressure. Life just finds a way.
It really seems to. How about something like radiation? Surely that stops life.
You'd think so, but some organisms are incredibly resistant. The most famous is probably Deinococcus radiodurans.
I think I've heard of that one, Conan the bacterium.
That's the nickname. It can withstand doses of radiation thousands of times higher than what would kill a human. Its trick isn't necessarily preventing damage, but being incredibly efficient at repairing its DNA when it gets blasted.
An amazing repair kit. Okay, one more really fundamental need, water. What happens when there's almost none? Can life survive complete dryness, desiccation?
Yes, many organisms can. It's a state called anhydrobiosis, life without water. They basically shut down their metabolism and can survive in a dormant state for incredibly long periods.
Like seeds, almost.
Kind of, yeah. Famous examples include tardigrades, the so-called water bears. They're microscopic animals known for their toughness. Also, brine shrimp embryos and bacterial spores like Bacillus civilis. These spores are incredibly resistant.
How long can they last like that?
Potentially an incredibly long time. There was an astonishing discovery where scientists revived a bacterium, a halotolerant one, meaning it likes salt, from inside a 250-million-year-old salt crystal.
Wait, 250 million years.
That's right. It had apparently survived dormant in tiny pockets of fluid trapped within the crystal as it formed. 250 million years.
That just blows my mind. It completely redefines what dormant or even alive might mean over geological timescales.
It really does challenge our temporal perspective on life.
Are there any other just bizarre chemical extremes life handles?
Oh, plenty. We find halophiles thriving in water much saltier than the ocean, like the Dead Sea or salt evaporation ponds. There are bacteria that tolerate organic solvents, which are usually toxic. Others handle high concentrations of heavy metals. There are even algae that can survive under an atmosphere of pure CO2. And some, like the alga Dunaliella bardawil, live in very salty, very sunny places and protect themselves from intense sunlight by producing massive amounts of beta-carotene, which actually turns the water pink or red.
Like sunscreen, but internal.
Exactly. And life isn't just in water or soil. We find endolithic microbes living inside rocks in places like the Antarctic deserts. And there are even bacteria just floating in the air above cities. Life seems to exploit almost every conceivable niche.
It's truly everywhere. So let's pull this all together. We've seen what they are, where they live. What are the big takeaways? What does all this mean for us, for our understanding of evolution and for looking for life beyond Earth?
Well, first, it fundamentally reshapes how we view evolution and the origins of life here. The fact that complex ecosystems can exist entirely without sunlight, powered by chemistry. It strongly supports the idea that life might have started in similar environments. Deep-sea vents, maybe, or hot springs.
Not necessarily the warm little pond Darwin imagined.
Exactly. It broadens the possibilities for where and how life could have gotten its start on the early Earth. It suggests life might be more deeply rooted in the planet's geology and chemistry than we thought.
Okay, so it changes our view of the past. What about the present and future? Practical applications.
Huge implications for biotechnology. We touched on it with PCR and detergents. Those enzymes from extremophiles, extremozymes, are incredibly valuable because they work under conditions where normal enzymes would just break down.
Like extreme heat, cold, pH.
Right. This makes them super useful for industrial processes, manufacturing, bioremediation, cleaning up pollution, food processing, medical diagnostics. It's a massive field, finding and utilizing these robust molecules from extremophiles.
So studying these weird microbes actually leads to real-world tech.
Absolutely. They provide tools that nature has already perfected for extreme conditions.
Okay, biotech is huge, but maybe the most mind-bending implication is for astrobiology.
Yeah.
Search for life elsewhere.
Without a doubt. This is where it gets incredibly exciting. Every time we hear a report about potential liquid water elsewhere in the solar system.
Like under the ice on Europa, Jupiter's moon, or maybe ancient water on Mars.
Exactly. Those reports generate so much excitement because of what we've learned from extremophiles here on Earth. We now know that wherever we find liquid water on our planet, virtually no matter how hot, cold, salty, acidic, or pressurized,
Life finds a way.
life finds a way. So the presence of liquid water, even in seemingly harsh conditions elsewhere, becomes a much stronger beacon in the search for life. It dramatically expands the definition of a potentially habitable zone, both within our solar system and beyond.
So the sheer toughness of life here gives us more hope for finding it out there. Does their survival here also suggest life could potentially survive the journey between planets?
That's the really fascinating extension, leading into ideas like panspermia, the hypothesis that life might spread between celestial bodies.
Riding on meteorites, maybe?
Potentially. We now have data showing that some microbes, particularly hardy spores like Psilocybulus again, can survive exposure to the vacuum, radiation, and temperature extremes of space, at least for certain periods.
Wow.
Combine that with modeling about asteroid impacts ejecting rocks from planets. It makes the idea that life isn't necessarily confined to its planet of origin seem, well, less far-fetched than it used to. Figures like Richter, Thomson, Arrhenius explored these ideas historically, and now we have some experimental backing for the sheer resilience needed.
So life might be tougher and
Yeah.
potentially more mobile across space than we ever imagined.
It certainly raises the question, are we constantly underestimating life's ability to survive and spread? The evidence from extremophiles suggests maybe we are.
Okay, so to recap for everyone listening, today you've seen how life really pushes the boundaries, thriving in conditions we once thought were completely impossible. Scalding hot springs, deep-sea trenches, battery acid environments, irradiated deserts, even frozen solid for millennia.
Extremophiles really force us to redefine what life actually needs to survive. The old rules were just too narrow.
They show us life isn't always about sunshine and gentle temperatures. It can be about chemistry, pressure, resilience against unbelievable odds.
It forces us to reconsider our basic assumptions about what life is and where it could possibly be.
So here's something to really think about. If life can exist in these utterly unimaginable conditions right here on our own planet, often running on chemical energy completely independent of the sun, what does that truly suggest about the sheer diversity, the potential pervasiveness of life that might be waiting out there on other worlds in our solar system or orbiting distant stars? How might this profound appreciation for life's incredible, tenacious adaptability shape our search for it in the future?